Hello everyone, welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads number 143. Before we get started, Melbourne CocoaHeads acknowledges the people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land. We pay our respects to them and their cultures. So, as I said, welcome to Melbourne CocoaHeads number 143. Tonight is the 11th of February 2021. This is the first meetup for 2021. So before I get into anything else, if you had anything to do with CocoaHeads last year, if you organised something or if you did a talk or if you just showed up, 2020 was such a weird year. So I wanted to start by thanking you from the bottom of my heart. You made CocoaHeads something really good last year, so thank you. We're going to carry on for at least for the first few months. We're going to be virtual meetups, but so thank you so much. The links that you want to know, melbournecocoaheads.com, that will take you to everything else. But if you need them, they're here as well. So there's Twitter, that's where I'll announce everything. YouTube, you've probably already found that if you're watching. And meetup.com, we schedule everything up through Meetup. Tonight, the first one we've got is Nabila with the month that was, or the months that were, perhaps. It's been a bit of a long one since last time, and Nabila will take us through it. Then Matt Bashara, he's been working on a little Mac app, and he wants to show us. I'm looking forward to this. This is the Edge of Darkness. He's not on Twitter, but you can find him on Slack at Matt Bashara. And after all this, we'll have a Zoom catch up. I'll put the link on Slack for that when it's time. Speaking of Slack, these are the interesting channels. There's lots of channels on Slack, but these are the ones that I really want to call out. Meetup, that's the chat about the meetup. If you've got a question to ask anybody, one of the speakers, go and ask it there, and they'll be hanging out in there for a little while after the talk tonight, so they'll answer your questions. Volunteers, that's the organisation channel. That's where I am and where all the people who like to organise CocoaHeads are. So we're quite open about it. Come and join us. Jobs, if you're looking for work or workers, and I've seen a few jobs being advertised there recently, go in there and have a look. And speakers, if you want to do a talk, even just a 5-minute talk or a 10-minute talk, however long, come and tell us about it in speakers. And there's support available if you're a first timer. We really want to encourage you. Upcoming events, well, you found tonight. What's next? CocoaHeads Drinks Night, that's Tuesday the 23rd of February at 6. I can't tell you exactly where it is because I don't know. Luke Tups will tell us when it's time, when it's going to be. That's an actual in-person event. So if you want to come to the pub and see some people, come along to Drinks Night. There's some other fun stuff. Sydney CocoaHeads, I think that's next Thursday. meetup.com/GDG. That's the GDG. That's the Android version of us. They're still kicking along, I think. And the web. That's a web version of CocoaHeads, really. There's a code of conduct. We're trying to make CocoaHeads an inclusive, fun place to be where everyone can feel happy and respected. This is the short version. There's the long version at our website. If there's any questions or you've got any concerns, if you see somebody being harassed, feel free to email us. It's anonymous. Or there's a form that you can fill out to submit a question. So I'd like to start off this by talking about apps that Melbourne has shipped, and I've got one submission this month. This is Coles. Coles made a complete redesign of their app, and that's been going for a long time. But they've finally shipped it, and it looks really good. So well done to Coles. Now, I reckon there's a lot more people who have shipped stuff, but I don't know who they are. So come and tell us in Slack. Go into Hash Meetup and let us know. I know it's been January and it's been a bit weird, but I reckon people have shipped stuff, so let us know. Gold sponsor for tonight and for the foreseeable future is Itty Bitty Apps. Thank you very much for them. They help us make CocoaHeads possible. And silver sponsors, again, helping us make CocoaHeads possible. Latitude Financial Services, REA Group, and Cognizant. Thanks very much to all of them for helping us make CocoaHeads happen. So, without any more ado, this is Nabila on the months that were. Please take it away, Nabila.
Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be presenting about the month that was talk. So it's basically a lightning talk about any news regarding the industry or Melbourne local news, and also any news from Apple as well. Traditionally, the speakers who present this talk would also express their rant or personal opinion, which I am going to do as well. And yeah, my opinion may be bias or against yours, so just want to give you some disclaimer. For this the month that was talk, I'm not just going to talk about any updates over last month, January, but I'm also going to be talking some major updates around the Christmas break over the holiday. So yeah, supposedly between December, January, and February today. Okay. Oops, I cannot seem to, here you go. So the first update will be Apple Fitness Plus that Apple just released early December. I forgot the exact date, but it's already available in Australia, and some people have already using the trials as well. So if you just recently purchased any Apple Watch, it may not be any Apple Watch actually. I think it's either Apple Watch Series 5 or 6, you'll be eligible to get between 3 to 6 months free trial subscriptions. So for those who don't know what Apple Fitness is actually a subscription fitness app released by Apple. They really target for general audience. So they do have various classes such as cardio, strength training, dance, and anyone with various fitness levels, starting from beginner to intermediate, can follow. To do these fitness classes, Apple claims that you don't need to have equipment, but even if you do have some equipment, for example, dumbbells or even like treadmill, you can also do those classes as well, because they do have some classes for rowing or even some strength training, as you can see from the image over here. Yeah, so with this app, it is well integrated with your Apple Watch, so you can see how many calories you burn or how high is your heart rate during the exercise. And the session or the classes can be broadcasted on your Apple TV, or you can also watch it from your iPad and also iOS. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't come on Mac, so for those who only have iPhone, they may have to stuck with like small screen to watch the video. And like I said earlier, it tailors to general audience. So when you watch the fitness class, you'll see 3 instructors. So one will give you instruction for people with lower fitness level, and the other one is for the intermediate. If you have tried or done some of these classes, let us know in the Meetup Slack channel. What do you think about it? So far, from my close friends, they think they are pretty good for people with a beginner level fitness. But yeah, I'll move on to the next one. Next one is Apple Family Subscription. So it is similar to what you have with the Spotify Family Subscription. So you can share your Apple TV, Apple Music, what else? Apple Fitness Plus or Apple News Plus subscription between your family. And it's not just for sharing subscription, but you can also use it to, let's say if you have children and you want to control their screen time as well, or you want to do some location sharing to your family members too. Yeah, it was released sometimes around December. Next one, early in December as well, Apple released AirPods Max. I believe this is the first ever headphone that Apple has released. It claims to have a very luxurious design, even though some people were criticizing about it. Other than that, a very good noise cancelling ability and some spatial audio feature as well. I do not have it, or do I do not have it, and I never tried before. But if you have tried this AirPods Max, let us know and share it on the Meetup Slack. What do you think about it? Like, what's the verdict? Is it really good as it claims? Last year in the mid-2020 WWDC, Apple announced that they are going to improve the transparency for users in terms of how apps are collecting your data informations, or even like tracking your data usage as well. So the first one is privacy nutritional label on App Store that has just been released early this year, I believe. So yeah, so you'll see when you go to App Store and when you are about to download an app, you'll see the nutritional label, privacy nutritional label, in which it will tell you what sort of information that the apps are going to be collecting. Not all apps are putting their nutritional label yet so far. For example, Google, but I know some major apps like Facebook and Instagram has done it, and unsurprisingly, their nutritional label facts are very, very, very long. Yeah. Other than that, app tracking transparency feature. So if you are an app developer and you are using the new ASCII SK Ad Network framework by Apple, you are giving the authority to users if they can, if they are letting the app to track their informations or usage or not. Usually this tracking or analytics in app are being used for personalized advertisement. Traditionally, you cannot avoid it unless you are not using the app. But now with the new SK Ad Network, you are giving users the authority or consent to do so. Yep, still relevant to the transparency feature by Apple. It's actually really, really hurting Facebook business model, because Facebook business model is revolving into analytics of users' usage, right? So what happened was, early this year, Facebook created a full page ad in a major newspaper media in USA, such as Wall Street Journal and the New York Post. It's basically criticizing about how Apple transparency update is hurting small business. But unfortunately, this movement, this PR, is not well received by the general public. So yeah, I find it pretty juicy. Let me know what you think about this Facebook dissing Apple ad in the Meetup channel, Slack channel. Other than that, WhatsApp, which a social messaging app that is also part of Facebook group, like Instagram as well, just released a new terms and condition that has convinced people to delete the app and move to more privacy conscious social messaging apps such as Signal or Telegram. Even though WhatsApp claimed to have end-to-end encryption and they won't be able to see what you text to your friends, they still do collect your data by getting information on who are on your contact list, or how frequent you are talking to your friends, and any business account that you have on your contacts as well. So I personally have started install Signal from this ever since that new terms and condition, but I could not really delete WhatsApp entirely from my phone, just because I still have extended family using it, and it's really hard to influence a large group of people to move to another social messaging app. And other than that, I do have some business accounts on my contact as well. Yeah, but I'll definitely will be using more Signal app than WhatsApp. And early this month, there's a Twitter thread about scam apps on App Store. So what happened is, to give you context, this guy, Costa, he actually released autofilling or keyboard app on App Store, but another developer, another publisher are copying his app, not exactly copying, but like impersonating his app. So another app claimed to do the same and claim to be the same as well, deceiving a lot of users. And this app is actually not doing what Costa's app doing. So once you download this imposter app, it will show a large button that instructs user to tap it to unlock the app. But what it actually does is actually once user taps that button, it's making an in-app purchase, or it's getting user to subscribe to the app subscription. And even though this app is a scamming app, it was still on App Store for quite some time. And amazingly, this app has 4.6 ratings despite having a lot of one-star review. It's probably because they purchased this 5-star ratings. Maybe they use some kind of bots to fill up these reviews. And yeah, this guy created 3D threads to expose these shady business models and how App Store is letting this kind of app existing in the market. Up to today, this app is no longer in the App Store, but similar apps, impersonating apps like this, are still in the App Store, I believe. Yeah, I'll move to the next one. I tried to keep this the month that was presentation really short, so I'm just going to try my best to quickly explain the rest of the news that I gathered. So iOS 14.5 beta has released, and you can start unlocking your phone with your Apple Watch. Sorry. As you can see, as you already know, during this pandemic, people start using their mask when they go outside. But the problem is, for those people who are using iPhone with the face unlocking feature, they are not able to do so because half of their face is being covered by mask. So Apple is releasing this such helpful feature to let users to unlock their app with their Apple Watch. But I find that this sort of helpful feature is released. It's a bit late. I wish that they actually released it back early in early 2020 when pandemic starts to happen globally and a lot of people are wearing masks. But it's going to come soon anyway. I'm pretty sure they are going to release iOS 14.5 either this month or closer. And another one is Big Sur update. So prior 11.2.1, there's anyone with MacBook Pro model between 2016 to 2017, they have an issue where when they update to the latest Big Sur version, they cannot charge their MacBook when their MacBook's battery percentage is above 1%. So in this latest update, Big Sur 11.2.1, they are fixing that issue. Not many people are experiencing this issue, I believe, or at least in my close circles. But if you do have that issue, please share it in a Meetup Slack channel. A research in Mount Sinai, I think that's from California. A research from Mount Sinai, they claim that Apple Watch heart rate sensor can predict COVID-19 up to a week before the swab test. I find it pretty interesting. Well, obviously we cannot rely on Apple Watch to do some health diagnosis, but I think it can also, if this is proven to be 100% true or accurate, I think this could also give some sort of awareness for people who may not develop the symptoms, COVID-19 symptoms, but are actually already infected. Yeah. Last one is, so Apple Watch regular heart rhythm gets approved in Australia by the TGA. This doesn't mean that the ECG on Apple Watch feature are approved yet, but I think this is giving like a signal. Maybe we are closing to get ECG feature on Apple Watch in Australia. And lastly, so on December, we are actually having some small Christmas break barbecue with some fellow people in Melbourne from some people in Melbourne CocoaHeads community. And I couldn't get the photos with a lot of us. This is the photo that I got from some people who attended the barbecue. Yeah, I do really miss attending face-to-face people from the community and actually talk with them. There are some people from the community that I haven't seen for more than a year or more. So let's hope that in 2021, when vaccine has been released, we could finally host the meetup face-to-face eventually. So yeah, that's my short talk for the month that was. I will bring it back to Hugh.
All right, thank you very much, Nabila. That was really good. I'd actually forgotten about Apple Fitness Plus. I have a trial subscription, and I should get onto that. Thank you. Next is Matt Bashara, Edge of Darkness. This is a Mac app he's been working on, and he's keen to show us, and I'm keen to hear. So over to you, Matt.
Hi, my name's Matt. I'm a senior mobile dev at REA in a division of the company called the Customer Core Mobile Chapter, and we are hiring for a lead mobile dev at the moment. So with the plug out of the way, I'd like to talk about a small app that I wrote, I think a week or two ago. So I've got the animated GIF on screen kind of demonstrating what the app does. So I'm not really the kind of person to go out and buy the shiniest, newest thing, or even if I need a piece of technology, I'll kind of hold off and try to make do with what I have. But recently, a couple of people close to me each gave me a separate monitor as a hand-me-down. So I went from just using my MacBook's built-in display to having two external monitors. And it was really cool. At first, all the extra screen real estate was kind of new and amazing to me because, COVID, right? I've been working from home pretty solidly for the past year. But one thing that started to kind of frustrate me a little was the fact that, I had the brightness controls for the built-in display literally at, the press of a button away for the built-in display. But that was less than half of the displays that I was now using, and there was no way to control the external display of the monitor except having to actually use the awkward on-screen display for the external monitors. So I wanted to write an app that does what you see it doing here in the animated GIF, one that adjusts the brightness level of all the monitors that you've got plugged in a synchronized way. So let's dive into the code and see how I actually did this, because a couple of people who I showed this to said, how did you get hard control over the external display hardware like that? And long story short, I don't. It's a trick. So let's start off with the main class here, the class that manages most of what goes on, just called Darkness. So most of the code that's visible right now is probably not very exciting to any Cocoa dev. We just have a user defaults object we persist a float to the user defaults. We have a function down here called register defaults, and we register a small number under the key alpha. All of that isn't really very interesting so far, but let's just take a look at the init function here and just step through what the app does when it starts up. So aside from registering the user defaults, it calls this function called recreate windows, key event listener.run, and then observe screen changes. And this pretty much sums up the entire functionality of the code base. It's really not very big or complicated. So the first thing that it does is it creates a window for each screen attached to the Mac. It creates a window the entire width and height of the screen, which covers the entire screen. And the way that it works in essence is all it does is it sets the background color of every window to black and then gives it an alpha value greater than 0. So effectively, it's kind of sort of adjusting the brightness of every display, but really it can't make it brighter than it is originally. It's not like it adds HDR to the monitor somehow. So I called the app darkness because it really only makes things darker. Overall though, assuming that you set the brightness on your external display as kind of as bright as they go, and it kind of matches the internal display, if you just keep them on that setting, then you can just use this app and it mostly mimics the built-in brightness controls pretty well. So first, the kind of like a lot of details left out of actually creating the windows here. So I'll open up this function in an extension on NS screen, create overlay window. So again, I've described kind of in broad strokes what this function does. It just grabs the size and width of the entire screen. So being an extension on an NS screen, I can just get those properties here. Creates a new NS window. And the only really relevant things are the style mask and screen self. So I don't want to make this presentation literally just reading documentation, but I want to show people who might not be familiar with it the crazy, it's a bit of a crazy initializer here. So we've got a couple of different initializers. Most of these arguments that you have to specify here aren't really interesting, but the two that are really relevant are the screen parameter, because that means that you're positioning the window relative to a specific screen that you pass in a reference to. Without this, the coordinates for the X and Y of the window are taken as being relative to the bottom left-hand corner of the display with the dock in the menu bar set to display on the primary screen. And it would be more math to figure out exactly what the coordinates were to do that. So if you just pass the screen, it makes things a little bit easier. The other relevant option here is nswindow.styleMask. So this is pretty much, normally you would just pass in titled, closable, miniaturizable. It's really a representation of the style of the toolbar of the app and any available controls for the style of the toolbar, though it does also include whether or not you can resize it and whether it's a full screen view or if it's like a little panel that pops up like the font panel or anything like that. So conveniently enough, for the purposes of this app, setting .borderless was all I had to do. So the docs here kind of give you the main points behind it. This window can't become key or main by default. Key window means it accepts keyboard input. Main, I think, means that I'm not sure what it means, to be honest, but it doesn't accept keyboard input, and that's kind of the important thing, because you got to remember, like, if this is a regular macOS window overlaid on the top of the entire content of the screen, you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. You're not going to be able to click anything on the screen. You're not going to be able to type anything in unless you command tab. But to somebody using the app, that might not be obvious. So yeah, that's pretty much just how it creates the window to start off with. Sets the background color to black. Tells it that it can't hide. Again, there's only a couple of really relevant options here that we set on the window after we instantiate it. We just jump back a little bit here in the documentation viewer. So this one here, ignores mouse events equals true. This is one of those things where the entire viability of the app depends on this property either being there or not. And when I first sat down to try to write it, this was kind of the first property that I wanted to look for, because this is what tells the window that it should not intercept mouse events at all. So you can have the app running, but wherever you click on the screen, it'll just completely pass those mouse events through to wherever they be if that window wasn't there at all. Then we've got window.level. And the window level is something that I find it a little bit difficult to explain. It seems kind of like it's easier to get it by example. So normally on any modern graphical OS that doesn't run on a phone or a tablet, you have multiple overlapping windows, and you can say that one window is in front of another or behind another. But regardless of what windows are visible on the screen, or in front of another window or behind another window, as an example on macOS, whenever you use the menus are always in front of all of those windows, regardless of the order that those windows have relative to one another. So this is kind of what the window level represents. It represents kind of an ordering that gets imposed on menus, on windows, that kind of groups them into categories and then puts certain categories of window in front of or behind others. So if we take a look at the type properties here, they're good examples. So there's a type property dock, main menu, normal, screensaver, status bar. So you can kind of get the idea. Like, you would assume that the screensaver window level is a much higher window level than the normal window level, because you don't want pretty much anything to ever appear on top of the screensaver, particularly if it's acting as like a screen lock as well. But that said, you probably don't want the menu bar or the dock to appear on top of the screensaver, but you would want them to appear in front of other normal windows. So this was another kind of key property that I had to figure out would be useful for this app. And what I've done is I've just added, because under the hood it's I think it's just an int under the hood. So what you can do is you can just do .screensaver or whatever +1, and that means that it will always put it in front of the screensaver and then everything else behind the screensaver as well. So I'll demo it in a little bit, but pretty much the only windows that aren't covered by the kind of darkening windows are the on-screen HUD indicators like that, and the mouse cursor itself. So it apparently does work over screen sharing, so I'll demo it at the end and just show people that. But yeah, so the last thing here that's really relevant in NS Window is the collection behavior. So you can kind of take a look at the values that are specified in that option set there. Can join all spaces is sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I think that the documentation and the names for these aren't 100%. So yeah, the discussion for this one is the window appears in all spaces, the menu bar behaves this way. Oh, right, I remember now. The documentation for this class is actually not too bad, because it gives you like concrete examples of what in the system uses these various attributes. So managed here, the window participates in spaces in expose. Transient, it floats in spaces and is hidden by expose. And then stationary, which is what this app uses, it's unaffected by expose. It stays visible and stationary like the desktop window. I just really like that whoever wrote this documentation added specific examples where they could. So there's a bunch of options here, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but pretty much it was a process mostly of just trial and error in seeing what was helpful and what was not helpful in making the app behave in the way that I wanted to. Also, it's worth calling out that there's this one lone kind of class property down the bottom here, full screen none, which I guess was added a bit later because there's no documentation. It appears separately from the others, but we didn't have to use that for this app anyway. So that's pretty much how it creates the window that it ends up displaying on each screen. So if we jump back to the main object in the app now, we can see that what it does is in this function recreate windows, it first removes any windows that it happens to have already created first with the order out function, and then creates the new windows and then calls order front regardless on them. So these functions that start with the word order might seem a little counterintuitive. They don't have names that are really very meaningful, I think, in like a modern development environment. But part of what I love about doing Mac dev as opposed to iOS dev is that you'll find all these APIs that are still useful, but they date back from the late 80s. And I think that order front regardless and related methods might be some of those. So we can take just a quick look at the docs for this one. So order front moves the window to the front of its level. That's pretty much it, even if the application isn't active, without changing either the key window or the main window. So basically, it just makes the window that you call this on move to the front visually, but leaves keyboard focus alone and doesn't switch to the app, I don't think. So the next function that I want to go over is observe screen changes. So this function is called recreate windows, and it recreates the windows because what if the app is already started and then you plug or unplug a display? So usefully, Cocoa provides us a notification that it posts whenever that kind of thing happens. So all we have to do is observe for it, and in the closure here that gets called when that event occurs, we just call recreate windows again. So the only other thing that we haven't really looked at yet is how do you control this app? I didn't want to give it any user interface whatsoever because I figure I've already got a ton of crap sitting in my menu bar and I don't really want to add to it unless it's absolutely essential. And for reference, the version of this app on GitHub in the README, I think the way that I actually tell you to quit it is just by using the terminal and typing in pkill darkness, which might not be very user-friendly, but there we go. So how do we control this app then? There's something here called a key event listener, and there's some code here which probably won't make a ton of sense yet, so let's jump into the event filter class. Oh, and it's unfolded everything, cool. Let's do that. So this class here, we'll ignore this bridgeable protocol at the top for now. This class acts as a way for the app to establish a system-wide event filter. So that means that macOS provides you ways to grant apps permission to get access to just all keyboard and mouse and trackpad gesture input. And this is a nice Swifty wrapper around the code that lets you do that. This is some pretty old code, some pretty old APIs. And if you were to rewrite this app in Objective-C, you would have to use a C API. It's not even an Objective-C API. So this presents some unique challenges. Let's just take a look at the callback variable here first. So I should expand this whole thing out. What we do at the end to actually run the thing is we see if we can actually create this tap object here. The return type is a CF mark port, which is, I'm not going to get into at all. But if we can't create it, we display an error to the user asking them to check that they have the right permissions. I should probably rephrase that so it makes it clear that I'm talking about the system preferences thing. So this here. And yeah, this gives you a quit button if it can't do the thing. And if we can create the tap, then it does all this gobbledygook with CF run loop and adds the event tap to the run loop. That's the only way that you can start it to actually sniff events and get notified about things that happen. So let's take a look at this tap variable now. I've got the docs open here for the C function. And there's only a few that really make any significant difference to how this app behaves, I think. So the first one here, CG session event tap is what I've specified for this parameter. They call this a tap location. It's pretty much, if you imagine a sequence of events of like, okay, so now I've gotten a raw keystroke event from the keyboard. I've got that over USB. Then the system will do something like, okay, which process should this be directed to? Then it'll do something like, okay, so how do I map that into an actual character that should be displayed? This kind of specifies at what point in that whole process your tap should be inserted into the event stream. And again, it was mostly trial and error here. And I ended up choosing CG session event tap, and that ended up working. Placement is similar, except it's kind of like if the location is the window level, then the place is kind of which window is in front of one another. So within the location that you specified, which I specified as CG session, then in that location, do you want that to be the first tap in that category or the last tap in that category? And again, I tried this value, it worked, I stuck with it. The third option here is kind of a bit misleading though. It's called options, but it's really just, do you want this to be a passive listener or an active filter? So this is actually really significant, and I think that it should probably have a different name, because default tap actually establishes an active filter by default, and you have to specify it explicitly if you don't want to be an active filter, if you just want to listen to events only. That can trip you up during development, because if you have an event tap, an event filter, sorry, you're able to modify events in the stream or create new ones or drop them entirely. And if you say have your callback function return null by default, then if you don't know that this setting here will create an active filter and you return null from your callback, that means that you will be dropping every single event that your tap is configured to match. So in theory, I was lucky enough to avoid this. You could very easily get your system so that you would not be able to have any keyboard or mouse or trackpad input. So yeah, if you do pull down the code for this and play around with it, my advice would be enable the SSH server on your Mac first, just in case something like that does happen. So the more specific stuff to this implementation of an event listener are these three properties here. So the mask is a CG event mask. If I click on that, I think it'll open up the official Apple docs. And I'm just trying to find, nope, it's not going to show me anything useful there. Cool. I'll open it up here because pretty much you can see a couple of examples here. I wish there was more, but I don't know how to get to them right now. It's a series of constants defined by the Quartz framework, which act as like a old school like C bit mask to inform you what kind of event an event is. Is it a mouse event? Is it a keyboard event? Is it a key being pressed down? Is it a key being released? Is the mouse moving left or right? Or is it like clicking one of the buttons? In more modern versions of macOS, they've added new event enums for multi-touch gestures and that sort of thing as well. So that's that. I think that there's a way to get a list of all of them that we can get to in a bit. So pretty much when you create an instance of this event filter, you just have to specify an event mask and a nice Swifty closure called handler to act on any events that match that event mask. So kind of the trickiest bit of this class is this callback thing here. Because this is a C API, you can't just pass in a closure. And because, C, it's not even Objective-C, you can't even pass in a target and action. What you have to do is you have to pass in a C function pointer. Swift makes it really nice to work with C-style function pointers. So this looks like any other, well, aside from the unsafe mutable rule pointer types, it looks like any other Swift closure. But under the hood, the compiler will turn this into a C function and then make references to it, such as the one here, a C function pointer that you can just pass to any of these, really old school APIs. And you can use that pretty much just as you'd expect. There is one problem here though. So I'm in my callback. I've just got a key that I want to react to. Let's say that I want to call the handler with some event, and I try to build that. Oh, okay. Instance member can't be used on event value of this type instead. Well, if I do self dot, cannot find self in scope. Oh, it's a private let. Let's make that a lazy var. Let's see if we can get around this. Self.event. Okay, so here we've actually hit a brick wall. A C function pointer cannot be formed from a closure that captures context. So it's not, it looks like it's any other closure, but it's not really a closure in the true sense of the term, because it does not allow you to close over any variables that you have access to in scope. If you're using it as a C function pointer, then you are limited to all of the restrictions of C function pointers, such as no, you don't get to automatically grab references to variables that you want to use. So how did the old school C programmers get around this? Well, there's this nearly ubiquitous void star typed parameter to this function called user info. And that's just an arbitrary pointer to some memory address. And you can specify one if you want, and if you do, then it's up to you to deal with that. It doesn't perform any memory management on that or anything like that. It's just a pointer. Hence, you have references to the type unsafe mutable raw pointer in this function. And there's this neat class here called unmanaged, which I'd never even seen before I started working on this app. And what the unmanaged class lets you do is what the entire point of Swift is to prevent you from doing, really. It lets you manually manage or not manage memory, so the docs aren't coming up. But pretty much what this callback function pointer does is it just checks if we can get an instance of this event filter thingy from this bridge function, which I'll go into shortly. And if it can't, it just passes the original event unchanged. Although note that even though we get passed in just a plain reference to a CG event, we have to call unmanaged.passOnRetained in order to return the value. Otherwise, it calls the event filters.handler function. And in any reasonable code, this would just be like self.handler with the event. And then if some value is returned, then that value is passed using managed.unretained. So this bit here is very important. How do we go between the C world of function pointers and no memory management to the Swift world where you don't have raw memory addresses for anything at all? So the class here, event filter, conforms to this protocol bridgeable. And let's look at bridgeable now. So it's a simple enough protocol. It just defines two functions. One's to bridge things to being a raw pointer. One is to bridge Swift objects out, well, Swift class instances specifically out from being raw function pointers. So the static function just accepts some pointer, and if it can get a valid instance from that pointer, it will return it. If not, it will return nil. And the implementation of that is here. So again, we just take unretained value. So I haven't attempted to do any memory management on the objects that go from Swift to C or back again. Again, this is a very simple app, and the one instance of event filter that ever gets created stays in memory for the lifetime of the app. If there's any situation more complicated than that, this code might fall down a bit, but so far it seems to work well enough for my purposes. And then we've got the instance function bridge, which returns an unsafe mutable raw pointer version of a reference to self. So that's what we do here to enable us to get a reference to what in normal Swift code would just be self into a C function pointed here. So if we now go back to the main darkness class here, we can kind of put the last piece of the puzzle in place. So the key event listener creates an event filter. So this is specifying that all we care about in this event filter are key down events. And if I open that, there we go. So this is the list of all the events that I was talking about earlier. So you can get informed when there's tablet proximity events. Flag exchange is when you just press and modify a key, other mouse drag. There's a bunch more to find elsewhere. So because it's a mask, you just take one and then left shift it by the raw integer value of whatever that thing is. And what we do is we switch over the result of this call here on the event that we get. The event is in the implicit $0 variable there, called get integer value field. So again, this is like some very old APIs. An event could be anything, right? It could be to do with the keyboard or the mouse. It could be pressing a button down or up. It could be a motion event. It could be a tablet event. Rather than have, say, a ton of, this is old school documentation, everything's listed on one page. Rather than have, 50 or 60 different properties or instance methods on the CG event class. Instead, there's just a couple of functions. One is CG event get integer value field, and the other one is get double value field, I think. And you pass in a reference to the event, and then a numerical identifier that corresponds to the information that you want. So again, there's kind of a lot of information that can be included in events. So we've got mouse event, number, click state, event, subtype, auto repeat, key code, keyboard type. So the ones starting with keyboard and key are kind of the ones most relevant to this app. And we get the integer value of the keyboard event key code. So this one here. Key to access an integer field that contains a virtual key code of the key up or key down event. Again, this was a case of trial and error. I pretty much just had a version of this that just logged the integer value of the key code and then pressed the buttons that I wanted to use to control the app and looked at the console output. So it turns out that whatever numbering system these things use, 122 is F1 and 120 is F2. Upon getting any other event, we just return the original event unchanged. That's the very important part, which if you don't do, you can disable keyboard input. However, we do actually return nil if either of the keys that we're listening for is pressed. And doing this means that the event never gets to the focused app. So like the built-in brightness and volume controls, when you press that button, the system kind of grabs that event, and no other app kind of inadvertently receives that event and starts beeping at you or doing something unexpected or whatever. It's probably not much of an issue with F11 and F12, but F1 and F2, I can easily imagine there's some crappy written Mac apps where if you press F1, it actually tries to open up a help screen that you might not want, or that sort of thing. So yeah, from here, the code is pretty self-explanatory, I think. Self.modify darkness $0 plus self.delta. So if we look at this function here, it's just kind of, I thought it was a little bit of a nicer way of reducing and incrementing the darkness value there. And then when we change that value, it's automatically persisted to user defaults. And then after that value gets changed, we then go through all the windows and just change the alpha value. So let me see if I can do Command R and have something useful happen. Build succeeded, okay. Okay, event app creation failed, ensure it has the correct permissions. It's to be expected every single time after you rebuild the app because security. So if you move, so even though the app is already in that list, you move it to the list again, and then it should allow you to run it okay. And so let me press F1 and F2. There we go. It's much more useful on computers that you're actually sitting in front of in person. But I want to show off, notice how the cursor is unaffected. It turns out that the cursor at some level in the system is actually treated as its own separate window, and it's given a window level that's higher than any other possible window level. But also the on-screen HUD is unaffected by this. I kind of didn't plan for that, but I think it's more of a surprise feature than a bug, so I don't really intend to do much about it. So yeah, that's pretty much the entire app. Yeah, I guess, do people have any questions about it? I'll take a look on Slack because I can't hear anybody talking, right? What's the font? Oh man, yeah, I'll get you a link to the font. It's a really nice font, huh? Anyway, so yeah, I hope people enjoyed that. It's a lot of really old and weird and potentially dangerous APIs, and it's something that I would have expected somebody to have already written, but it was kind of cool that they didn't, because it gave me a chance to actually do some Mac coding, which I haven't done in a long time. So yeah, that's all I've got. Back to Hugh, I think.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Matt. That went really fast, and I loved every second of it. I am looking forward to having a few questions afterwards on Slack or on Zoom even. Particularly, I love the old documentation and going through all that stuff because it's just so complete, and they have thought of so many features. I love it. So thank you. It remains for me to say there's upcoming events. CocoaHeads Drinks Night is on the 23rd of February. That's at 6 p.m. It's a Tuesday. It's in a pub somewhere. I don't know which pub. We will tell you on Twitter or on Slack. And some other fun stuff. Sydney CocoaHeads is next week. There's GDG Melbourne and the web meetups as well. Go and check them out. Thank you so much for coming. This is the end of our live stream. I will post on Slack in a minute a Zoom link where we can go in and just have a general powwow and a chit chat afterwards. So good night to you all. Thank you.